Hello and welcome to Oldfield Road Studio. It's great to have you with me this evening. I'm delighted you could join me. Need to do a little bit of housekeeping for you to start with. I've got 3 cameras set up here in the studio, and I'm controlling the cameras. I've got no assistant, as well as painting the painting and talking to yourselves. So I've decided, because I can't monitor the chat in real time, to switch the chat off. I thought that was safer for all of us. There are some very, very strange people out on the internet, so you know, without a moderator I don't think it'd be a good idea to have chat. So how are we going to proceed? Well, I'll start by describing the materials I'm going to use, and also demonstrating the preparation of the surface that I'm going to paint on, followed by a very simple pastel underpainting, and then we'll move on to building up the painting and refining it in several layers. Hopefully I should get to the point where I'm about 90% finished, and then I'll stop at that point. The last 10% usually takes a lot longer than the first 90%. So it's pretty boring to watch the last 10%, which is why most demonstrators don't show that last 10%. But where you get, if you go to a workshop, that's where you can get you know, advice over the last short part to finally finish off your painting. Okay, so without more ado, let's go and have a look at what materials we're going to use tonight. I'll just mention that the products that I'm using tonight I don't have any affiliation with, so I don't gain any money by advertising them. They're just products that I really like to use. I'm going to be painting on this grey-green multimedia paper made by Clairefontaine. It's quite a tough little paper, and it's 250 grams a metre squared in metric, or 115 pounds a ream. It's pretty dimensionally stable, and so it doesn't it doesn't buckle when you get it wet, which is just as well, because I'm going to need to use a wet process tonight. I'm working on an A2 sheet, and I'll be it's quite smooth, the surface. You could possibly use it with pastel pencils if you were going to do a fairly detailed pastel painting without layers, but I want to use some layers, so I'm actually going to use golden pumice gel, and it's a really nice product to use. It's an acrylic gel with pumice. It's a grey colour, and it goes on fairly transparently, so that you get this really nice, exciting surface to work with, and then you can easily get 4 or 5 layers, which will be enough for what I want to do with the demonstration painting. When I'm working with acrylic, I always damp the brush in water first, and then just adjust the amount of water in the brush. It makes it so much easier to clean them, and they last an awful lot longer if you do keep them completely clean once you've done your session. So I'm applying the gel in random strokes, as varied as I can make them, just doing it quickly all over, and changing the direction of the strokes all the time, as you can see. One of the things about working like this is that your paper can buckle when it gets wet if you're using the wrong sort of paper, but this multimedia paper, as I said earlier, it buckles very little when it gets wet, so it's fine to be using it for pastel. You can get the paper in a grey shade and also white, as well as this grey-green. I use them all from time to time, and I use them a lot when I'm painting acrylic paintings. However, tonight we're going to be using soft pastel. Obviously, that's what the demonstration's in. Now, I'm spreading the gel out pretty quickly, pretty thinly, because you don't want to put too much on in one go at this stage. If you do feel that you need more texture and more thickness, it's better to do a couple of coats when you're working with soft pastel. You could do a very thick coat if you're going to go over it with acrylic paint and you're applying it with a brush or some other, like a sponge tool or something. But with the soft pastel, it's better that it goes on fairly thinly to start with. Now I'm going to paint an area at this right hand side to give me a patch where I can try out my pastels to check the colours or the textures or whatever. So I want to do that that area from the right hand side. I don't waste this sort of paper, because at the end of the day, quite often when I've got an area like that where there's a few strokes on, I'll go and paint a small abstract on it, and then I really feel it helps me loosen up to paint an area that's got absolutely no labels to the things that are on it. So this is what this is my pastel box. It's hinged in the middle. This is the right hand side. I put the yellows, oranges, etc. on the right hand side, and then the other colours in the left at the left hand end. Some artists do it the other way round. I use a mix of pastels. There's New Pastels, there's Terry Ludwig, there's Mount Vision, there's Schminke, there's the whole range of pastels, and I do have others in sets that sometimes I challenge myself to just paint a painting using a particular set, and I keep them in sets for that purpose. So let's take a look at the references that I had a look at. This is an autumn scene in the English Lake District, and this is an early February scene in Scotland. So they were possibilities, and this one is a summer scene in England. But I could paint from any one of them happily, but this one really grabbed me with its arrangement of light and its feeling of a tunnel with a beautiful light, dappled light passing down through the trees. So I thought I'd have a go at this one. The problem with this one, of course, is that there's a huge amount of green, and most artists don't really like to paint quite that much green. So as I go through the painting, I'll be talking about how we can deal with that, how we can get a control of the amount of green and use other colours that approximate to green, and use a background to paint the green on that will help our, our composition and our colours. So we've changed cameras now, then we'll make a start on the underpainting. Initially, I just want to put a few lines down just to give me a feel into the picture. I'm using a small charcoal stick to do this. The lines don't really constitute a drawing. I'm just feeling my way in, and then I'll go onto the pastel sticks and paint the main underpainting shapes. But I just quite like to feel my way in for just a few lines. When we're working with the underpainting, we don't have to completely cover the green background, and it's possible when I get to the end of the painting that some of the green background will show through. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, depends how things go. But one of the things that you need to remember is that that green background is influencing my colour choices as I'm working. So I've just done this first shape. I'm getting some darks in. This is a dark brown, which is a slightly colder brown with a light touch. I've now moved on to a dark violet, Terry Ludwig dark violet. And again, I'm just using a light touch. I'm not trying to fill in the grain. All I'm going to do is just indicate where some of the darker areas of the trees are. And then I'll move over now to a mid-tone or mid-value violet as I come nearer to the bright part of the centre. Again, a very light touch. This isn't making so much noise. It's a much softer pastel. I can't remember what make this is, but anyway, it's not Terry Ludwig. And then we move over to a light violet for the part that's going to have the light in. Now, I mentioned in the problem with the greens, so I'm going to add in some dark blue. This is a new pastel that's going on now, and it's a dark blue, and it will be able to show through in places when we paint our layers. I'll let some of this blue show through, and I might even enhance it a bit in places. So we're now going to rub this in with a piece of pipe insulation, and then that'll be the underpainting finished. And as you can see the blues and the purples now as I rub in. Do the darks first. It makes a lot more sense to do it that way, but it does mean that you've got to use a clean area or piece when you come to do your lights. So we've got no real drawing at all with this underpainting. It's very, very loose. It's just a few broad areas where we've indicated darks, we've indicated some colour changes in the background, and then we're going to carry on and build up on this using several layers. Do the light area now. Again, it doesn't matter if it gets a bit polluted with the colours around the edge of it. It's just purely an underlayer. It's mostly going to be covered up, but we will let some of it show through, and you'll see why later. So why have I chosen the colours that I've used in particular? Let's take a look at this colour wheel. If you look at the violet that's just to the left of the red, its complement is a yellow-green, and as you move round towards blue, on that left-hand side, the complements move from yellow-green up to orange. And so in the painting, I've got already complementary pairs as an undercoat. The brown is a dark orange, so that's complementary to blue, and the violets are complementary to the yellow greens that I'll be introducing later. So it's not a completely haphazard choice. It is got some colour theory behind it. Before we move on with our painting, I'd just like to show you a close-up of the texture that we've got, combination of the pumice gel and then the underpainting of dry pastel that's been rubbed into it. And so this is what I was talking about when I said it's quite an exciting texture to work on. It's completely different to the very even sanded surfaces. I'm going to set up a small area of the dark tone to the right hand side, so that I can use that when I'm trying out different pastel sticks. So just a bit of the dark violet, and then rub it in with the pipe insulation, and as you can see, I've got a very similar area there to what's in the picture area, so I can just test out a few pastels. So try with a couple of different greens and see what they look like, and then I'll perhaps try, after I've done the greens, with a yellow. I'm using greens that I've got different hardnesses and softnesses, as well as different hues of green. It's good to be able to do that, to have a variety of textures in your painting, and you can achieve that much easier if you've got a range of hardness and softness in your sticks. Some people like to just completely use one brand of pastel, but I think you can get much more varied paintings if you use several different brands like I do. So I'm just trying now a few areas of very dark green, just guided by the reference, but no, as you can see, there's no outline drawings. So we're just putting a few areas of green in that will help us to give some green depth to our painting, and a lot of this violet that's in the underpainting will disappear, but there will be a significant amount that's left to show through. That's part of the strategy of controlling the greens. I'm going to do the same on the left hand side as I did on the right hand side. It's this dark green pastel is actually oh, I've forgotten the name, never mind, it'll come to me later. It's the English made pastels from Northumberland. Now I'm using a very, very dark brown, no, sorry, a very dark violet, to just indicate a few of the trunks. At this stage I'm not going to try to do them all accurately. I just want to get an indication of where I think things might go. I'm not copying the photograph exactly. And now I'm moving on to a little bit of the foliage that's a bluish green that's in shade. Now you can see that I'm not dabbing in the sense that I'm trying to create leaves. Each stroke is intended to convey a leaf mass, no individual leaves. So we're just feeling our way in at the moment with the layer of the blocking over above the underpainting. I think it'd be a good idea to strengthen the underpainting in this top corner, and yeah, I think I'll probably do the same in the other one when I get round to it. But so I'm using a dark green now to vary it, and as you can see, I'm using a very light touch. I don't press at all. When you're working in layers, it's important that you don't put too much pastel on in your lower layers, because you'll very quickly clog up the texture of your piece, and then you won't be able to add any more pastel. So yeah, this is the same as I did on the other side. Strengthen the dark violet underpainting just in these top corners, and then that'll help me maintain the really dark part of the light. Now I'm using a brown, and it's a harder stick, just to strengthen that tree trunk and branches. I won't be putting in anything like as many as there are in the photograph, but just helps me to think about where these foliage masses are going. So we're having a look now at the lighter foliage. Again, you can see that it's a very light touch, and I'm working in all over the painting. Obviously I can't do that simultaneously, but I'm not finishing off any area of the painting. I'm just moving about and trying to gradually bring areas of the painting into a similar stage of completion. And at this stage in this first blocking, there's absolutely no question that nothing will be complete. And some things are experimental and they'll be worked over. Other things will stand as they are. So that was a much more yellow green, and it's now I'm going to try a very much lighter green, and I anticipate that this will be how almost as light as I need to go in this area where we've really got the light shining through. So I've used really 4 tonal values of green, and I a very dark one, and then a lighter blue green, and then a lighter one again, then the yellow green, and now this very light green. So you can see that I just put a small amount over the surface, and it's already starting to show the glow that we want to achieve. Eureka! I've remembered the name of the dark green, they're unison pastels. Now I'm going to change cameras and then start on the rest of the work. So I'm using a light, very light touch with a light brown pastel, just to start an indication of tree trunks in this light area of the painting. The tree trunks are going to have to remain very faint so that they sit right at the back. I think it's time now to make a start on some work on the path and bring that up to a similar level that the foliage and the light area is. So initially I'm using a darkish yellow, a yellow ochre really, and I'm just going to make some marks. Notice that I'm varying the marks as I come closer. The marks are larger, and I'm trying to keep them so that they don't form patterns, that they're not the same shape or the same spaces apart. So I'm working now, I'm moving and just gradually working in some of the light greens over this bright area, and using as before a very light touch, and then I just keep going like this, and move to different parts of the painting, add a little bit at a time. In reality, if I was painting for myself, I would be painting a little bit slower than this. It would be a bit more considered, but when you've got the time limits of a demonstration, you have to work fairly quickly. Now what I'm doing now is varying the size of strokes. I'm sometimes using the flat side of the pastel, sometimes using the end a bit, and sometimes using, with these rectangular pastels, I'll use just the corner to make very small marks. So I've worked on the greens a bit more now, and I'm going to put some more light green on in this light area. You can see for yourself that I don't bother with learning the names that the manufacturers call the pastels, given that some of them pastel manufacturers just give the pastels a number, for example, like the unison pastels. And as you end up with hundreds of pastels, I just judge which pastels I want to use by eye, and in any one painting I'm not likely to use many more than 5 or 6 of a particular hue. So in this painting I'm limiting things to half a dozen of the greens, and then by doing that you don't lose control of what's going on. As I look at this scene and look at the reference, I'm thinking about I can go back 50 years to no 60 years to a path just like this, when there's two people walking along and they're on their first holiday together, and youth hostling in North Wales. And well, it was myself and my new girlfriend then, and we're still together now after 60 years. We've been married 57, but we were it was an item 60 years ago, and I can remember a path just like this. And then come forward 10 years, I'm walking along a path in Northumberland, in the northeast of England, and there's two children, one age 5 and one age 3, a boy and a girl, and they're walking along hand in hand, and that's my eldest son and my daughter. So I've got that memory with this kind of path. And then in addition to that, I've got come forward again to just a few months ago, initially when we came out of lockdown, and in mid Wales, again I was walking through a path exactly like this with the same girl that I walked with 60 years ago. So these sort of scenes carry a memory for you, but in addition to that, as a painter, one of the things I really love is the light, and so I like to try and capture a feeling of the light. The person who really put me onto trying to capture light in my paintings was Robert Brindley, the British painter who's a member of the Royal Society of Marine Artists, and I've been to many of his workshops, and he captures light beautifully in his paintings. So since I've been mentored by him, I've tried to get a real feeling of light in my paintings, and in fact that's really the primary subject of this painting, is the feeling of light in this woodland walk. So I want to talk about that a little bit more later on. So we've now got the paintings to, I think what we could say is the initial blocking stage. With this kind of painting, a bit difficult to divide things up, but so I suppose it's slightly artificial. But I'm now at the point where I'm thinking, right, I've got colour all over, and I'm going to now go back, have a think about it, and then refine the painting. In order to do that, I'm going to isolate the painting from the background of the green paper. Initially, the paper helped me by allowing me to refer my colours against an existing colour. But now I want to refer all the colours that I use to the colours that are already in the painting. So I'm going to use some black masking tape to remove the green background from around the edges of the painting. This black masking tape's not easy to come by in England. I ordered it from a London firm, but it's used a great deal. American painters like the black masking tape a great deal, so that's where I picked it up, because I've worked over there quite a lot, and I really think it helps to isolate. Some painters like to start with the black masking tape around your work, and others prefer to bring it in at a stage like this. after the I like to do it after the what I call the first block in. Some painters, excuse me, like to get the first stage of refinement finished before they go on to put the masking tape on, just to help them do the final finishing parts of the painting. But we're all different, aren't we? And so my likes are to do it at this stage. I think it's a great help as you follow the process. One of the things to bear in mind when you're working like this with the underpainting and then the block in and then layering over to do your refinement stages, your work will go through passages where it looks awful, where it looks a complete mess, and you just have to trust the process and keep working and keep adjusting. And in order to do that, I can't stress it enough, don't fill up the tooth of the paper. In this case, of course, it's the pumice gel. Don't fill it up by pressing too hard. I'm going to strengthen a couple of the tree trunks now as I start to go in and refine things. And there's still plenty of tooth left in this pumice gel that I'm working on. So I'm now using a very soft pastel. It's a blue earth pastel. They're fairly small and they're very expensive, but they've got a huge amount of pigment in them. You have to be very gentle when you're handling them, because it's easy to just crush them between your fingers if you're not careful, or if you drop them, and then you've dropped quite a few pounds or dollars worth of pigment. So I do think they're really nice to use, and also because they're so soft, it's not a good idea to use them in the early stages of the painting. You tend to get too much pigment on if you do that. So I tend to keep them and bring them into play at this stage where we're more than halfway through. I think you can see that it's beginning to take shape. There's still quite a bit of work to do, so I'm going to now have a go with this lighter yellow and work on the sunlit areas of the path. I'm quite tentative doing this. I don't. This also is a blue earth pastel, and so I don't want to get too much on, and just build things up slowly. Don't have too many things that look like they could be a line, although as we know, those light areas on the path did look like have a fairly linear feel to them, but always with a broken edge. And one of the things that I'm doing, which is difficult to see on the video, is I'm making use of the texture of the pumice gel in relationship to the marks that I'm making on the pastel. So this is part of the excitement of working with the homemade ground. when you put your marks on, they're not always quite what you expect. There's definitely a degree of serendipity in the work. So again, this is another Blue Earth one, a very soft green. It's a similar hue to some of the greens that I've already used, but it does look different because of the softness of the stick. So we're now starting to make marks that look a little bit more like individual bits of foliage against the dark background, and they'll stand out in front of the background. I didn't want to do that at earlier stages because with this process that I'm working, if you put detail in too soon, it just gets in your way. Keep it as broad as you can for as long as you can, and then add the detail. And you can see that as I'm adding the detail, if you look at the right hand side, that it's really starting to come forward now, compared to that light area which is sitting back. And of course that's exactly what we want. That's what we want to achieve. So I'm using very small marks and with a very soft pastel to achieve this appearance of foliage over the background. Now, if you think about this that I'm working now, how difficult it would be to put that detail in early and then paint the background around it. It would be extremely difficult. And just as we recommend that when you're painting sky holes through trees, you put the sky holes in after you've painted the tree, so that the very light sky hole is going on top of the darker pastel. It's the same with this woodland scene. I've developed the dark areas first. I've got the darkest darks down, and now in going over I'm putting the foliage in, and it sits forward against the darks. Well, what you have to do when you're doing sky holes, which I won't be doing in this example, is you maybe need to soften the edges of your sky holes to make them sit back behind the darks. But pastel is a medium where we paint light over dark. You're much less likely to get a muddy result with light over dark when you paint dark over light, and there are some times when I do that. Then it's easier to get mud. It's easier to get your darks to grey off and look muddy. So just that's something to bear in mind. Going back to what I was saying before about the subject and the memories it evokes, have you ever had a significant other, for example, or a good friend, or a child, or a grandparent look at a painting that you're doing and saying, wouldn't it be great if you were to put a little fox in there, or a figure with a little dog, or a child or two children? And I'm not for 1 minute suggesting that paintings that contain figures and animals and dogs are wrong, but in this case my subject matter is the feeling of light. It's the way the light falls through the foliage and onto the ground, and tunnel effect of the path in the woodland. If I were to add on at the end a figure, apart from the difficulty of making it fit in, that's difficult, but it's not impossible. It would immediately change the whole meaning of the painting. It wouldn't be about the light anymore. It would be about the fox or the deer or the person with the dog or the children. And I have drawn, have painted the scene I described in Northumberland 50 years ago, when two of my children were walking along a path hand in hand like this. I have done a painting like that, but this painting, it's not my intention to do that. And if I did have my significant other or friend, etc., would the advice from them, would I let them persuade me to change the whole meaning of the painting, which I've had in my mind since I actually looked through the references? So just something to bear in mind. As I said, it's not wrong to have figures, wildlife or people, but I think it's dodgy to take other people's advice that completely conflicts with the meaning that you want for your own painting. Have the courage to stay with your own thoughts, and if you want to do another painting and add in the fox, then do it with that in mind from the beginning. Do a second version rather than change the one that you've thought of, that you want to achieve. So that's my soapbox for the day. So I'm just using now a dark blue just to reinforce these feeling of tree trunks. You notice that the tree trunks all in the foreground, none of them have been brown, and they're you know, I've chosen a colour scheme at the beginning, and I'm staying with that colour scheme, and it's primarily as I showed you, it's actually called a split complementary colour scheme, really, where I've used complementary colours and almost complements throughout the painting. And one of the things that we bear in mind is that the complement of green, the direct complement of green, is red. Now there's no red in the reference, but I think it was John Constable, the British painter from the 1700s. He started to introduce, I don't think he was the first, but certainly he made it part of his signature almost, where he would find a way of adding something red into his paintings that had a lot of green in. And if you do that, it makes the green sing. So I'm probably going to think about that right at the end. Still working, you know, on the sunlight, just amplifying some of the areas of light on the floor a little bit. It's quite a slow process now, where we can you can see that what I'm doing is I'm never really working on individual tiny parts, I'm reacting to the marks I've already put down, and I'm putting other marks in. I'm not, apart from a few places where I put that green in that indicated foliage, I'm not thinking of the names of anything that I'm painting. So I'm now going in and I'm adding just some variety into the darker areas of the path. So I'm going to pick up an earth red pastel. I wouldn't use a very bright red, but a greyed down earth red, and just put a few spots in and see what that looks like. So we've got a couple of spots over on the right hand side. I'll just put a couple on the left hand side, and that's enough for the time being. Might want to put a little bit of red somewhere else in the composition. I'm thinking now that we are about 90% of the way there, so perhaps I'll just do a few more marks, just strengthen the dark with a brown in this corner. I don't want all four corners to be the same hue, so I've got two violet corners at the top, so just strengthen. And also perhaps a little bit of brown in some of these tree trunk areas. Just tidy up some of these areas on this left edge, and then we can step back really and consider what we've got. So just cleaning my hands off so that I can go over and switch the view. Yeah, so I think, yeah, we're about 90% of the way there now. So let's just take a step back and look at what we've got. I do think that the area of the path needs a little bit more work on. It's not quite as good as I'd like it to be. So I definitely would spend a bit more time on that. The distance that's in the light, I don't think I would touch that anymore. I think that's working pretty well. In relation to the greens, we've not got an overall green as there was in the photo reference. There's a nice colour scheme there that seems to me to be working quite well. So we range from oranges through yellow to yellow green to blue green, and then some blue, and then up to violet. So it works quite well as a colour scheme. But you could, if you wanted to, or I could anyway, add some more green in. You know, there's not an excessive amount at the moment. I could bring in a little bit more light into these nearer areas, but that's a decision that I think I'd probably take when I've slept on it and I see it in daylight. That's another issue, is that this painting's been carried out under very white artificial light, and it would be good to view it in daylight. The photograph was taken in a late afternoon light when the light was very warm, so the colour scheme I've chosen, it's not quite as warm as it was in the actual photo reference. So in order to have a look at the difference between them and decide whether or not that I would want to change some things, it would be good to compare them in daylight. One point is, at this stage there's plenty of tooth left in that pumice gel, so if I want to work more pastel onto the surface, I can do. So if you take that away with you from this session, that you build things up very gradually and use as light a touch as you possibly can manage, then you're in control all the time. You're in control. You can make changes right up to the last minute. And so I think that's where that's where I'm going to leave it tonight. I've just got a few more things to say before I actually finish. So I'd like to finish off by thanking you very much for being with me. I hope you've enjoyed what we've looked at, what we've done, and that you've learned something along the way. I really enjoy presenting these demonstrations. It's a great pleasure for me to work with you. Next month I'm intending to do another demonstration where I work on the same paper, but instead of just doing the pumice gel, I do an acrylic underpainting and then put a layer of pumice gel over the acrylic underpainting and then paint in pastel on top of that. I haven't decided what the subject will be yet, but I will put that out on Facebook. If you have enjoyed it, please click like on my YouTube channel and subscribe to it. The more people that like it and subscribe, the more I'll know that what I'm putting out is things that people like to watch and like to learn about. The comments are available on the YouTube channel, so if you've any questions or any thoughts, then please do put them in the comments and I'll have a look at those now that this session's finished. I'm going to make a cup of tea first and then I'll have a look at the comments on the YouTube. So thank you very much for being with me. Thank you.